Good morning, Boker Tov. There's a story told about a man who lived with his wife and 7 children in one room, in this crowded little room, and he was always frustrated. He was bumping into his kids, into his wife, and all the noise in this room. And so finally he went to talk to his rabbi to get some advice. And he said to his rabbi, "What should I do? We live in this tiny room, and we're always on top of each other, and I'm miserable." The rabbi said, "Tell me, you have some animals that you own?" He says, "Yeah, I have a farm behind my one-room house." He says, "What animals do you have?" He says, "Well, I have a cow." So the rabbi said, "Okay, go home, take the cow and bring it into the house." He's thinking, what? I don't have enough room for me and my kids. Now I'm going to bring the cow in? But the rabbi said to do it. He did it. He went home, he brought the cow in. Comes back to the rabbi the next day, says, "Rabbi, now we're really crammed in this tiny place with a cow." The rabbi says, "What else do you have on your farm?" He says, "I have a goat." He says, "Go home and bring the goat in." He brings the goat in. Now the goat's jumping around, the noises, it's crazy. He comes back to the rabbi next day and says, "Rabbi, I'm suffocating. I can't breathe. The house is cramped." The rabbi says, "What else do you have?" He says, "I have some chickens." He says, "Go bring all the chickens in." Comes back next day. He puts the chickens in his house. He comes back to the rabbi. He says, "Rabbi, now the chickens are all over the table, all over the place. We're going crazy. We're losing our minds." The rabbi says, "Okay, now go home and take out the cow and the goat and the chickens." And he goes home and he takes all the animals out of his house. And the next day he comes back to the rabbi and he says, "Rabbi, my house is so big. There's so much room now. It's so quiet. It's so peaceful. It's so wonderful." Everything in life is perspective. I look at what's going on in the world between a pandemic and racism and violence and vandalism, and I say, wow, if only the world could go back to the way it was before all of this started, how much happier and more wonderful things would be. We would never complain about anything. We would always be grateful. We wouldn't take anything for granted. But we don't have a choice. We can't roll back the clock. We can't turn back the hands of time. This is where we're at. And so what do we do now is the religious and moral question. So in this week's Torah portion, we have the priestly blessing. Now, if these are the 3 ultimate blessings of life, they must contain the formula and the secret to successful life. Because God chose these 3 verses to be the blessing that the Kohanim, the priests, shall bestow upon the children of Israel, and by extension, through the children of Israel, for all of mankind. So what is the secret formula of this 3-fold blessing? So if you look at it, you see that the first verse says, "May God bless you and protect you." Mission number 1, statement number 1, the first course is be a blessing unto others by being a protector. Meaning that we must respect one another, we must protect each other. You should not harm another person, you should not steal from another person, you should not speak negative words about another person. Always think that your moral responsibility is to be a blessing for others and to protect them from any harm. That's the first stage of the blessing. But then the blessing evolves to stage number 2. What's stage number 2? May God shine his face upon you and be gracious to you. Now, when you smile at someone, it represents love. Now we're not just talking about being a blessing and not doing harm. We're saying even more than that. Like God, we must all shine our faces upon one another. We have to show love to each other. But what kind of love? Vichuneka. Now in English we say, and be gracious to you. But the commentaries explain that the word chuneka is from the word chinam, which means free. Which means that there's 2 types of love. One type of love is reciprocal love, earned love, deserved love. But then there's unconditional love. Love that is free, not because you earned it or deserve it. I just love you unconditionally. And that is the second stage or phase of blessing. Number 1, be a blessing to others and protect them. Do no harm. Number 2, shine your face upon others. Shine your face upon others and show them unconditional love. So what could be the third blessing? The third blessing is, may God raise his face, Yisah Hashem, may God raise up his face, Elecha to you, V'yasem lecha shalom, and grant you peace. And our rabbis say, what does it mean, raise up his face? So Rashi says, may God conquer his anger. when you love someone, you look at them, you smile at them, you shine your face towards them, you show them love, unconditional love. But what happens when you're disappointed in someone? What's happened when somebody wronged you, angered you? Then you look down at the ground. You don't want to look them in the eye. So the Torah says, may God raise his face up and grant you peace. May God conquer his anger, that even if God is upset at us, even if we've disappointed him, may he raise up his face from disappointment and be able to look at us and grant us peace, that we can reconcile and make peace with our Father in heaven, with Almighty God. And once again, this is an instruction for man. Sometimes you're good to people. Sometimes you're a blessing to others. Sometimes you protect others. And even more than that, you have a smile. You radiate love and kindness and unconditional love, vichuneka, free love. But then someone hurts you, someone disappoints you, and now you can't look at them anymore. You look down. And you can go through life looking down, angry, disappointed, or you could learn, like God, to raise up your face, look them in the eye, and make peace with them. I think America has gone through the first two stages, and now we're up to the third test. First, we went through the pandemic, and the first order was, be a blessing to others. How? By staying home and wearing masks and practicing social distancing. And that's what all good Americans did. They practiced social distancing and stayed home in order to be a blessing and to protect one another from this pandemic. And thank God we were successful. Then we went to stage two. May we shine our face towards each other and show each other unconditional love. And indeed, that's what we saw. Throughout the pandemic, people were showing extraordinary kindness and love to one another. The first responders, the doctors, the nurses who are risking their lives every day to help save others. Think about all the acts of kindness for the elderly, for the sick, for the vulnerable. There was an outpouring of love, even to strangers, to one another, just to show love and unconditional kindness. But now we come to the third stage in America. Today there's anger. There's justified anger on behalf of the black community, which feels that racism has gone on for too long, and tragically an innocent man was pleading for his life, asking to be able to breathe for over 8 minutes, and a cruel, evil officer just kept his knee on his neck until he passed out and died. And now there's anger in America over the violence and the looting that has erupted, saying, is this the way to protest? Is this the way to honor the memory of George Floyd by vandalizing and attacking other innocent police officers? So much so that a number of officers now find themselves in the hospital, some of them struggling for their lives. And so America is filled with rage and with anger. And now as we pass the first two tests, we learned how to protect each other in times of crisis during a pandemic. We learned how to show each other unconditional love and radiate our smile at one another. Now we have to conquer the third challenge, the third blessing, that despite all the anger and the disappointment, we have to learn to raise up our faces, look each other in the eye, and foster peace amongst ourselves by coming to an understanding of how we can work together to curing the racial divide in America and to make sure that police brutality never happens again, and that no innocent man should ever die at the hands of police violence and brutality. And at the same time, no innocent people, whether it's police officers or citizens or shops, should be attacked or vandalized, people's property being stolen. That is unjustified as well. We're up to stage 3. Let us learn to raise our eyes, look at each other, look each other in the eye, and make peace. And then we will have a blessed society with all 3 of the priestly blessings. May Almighty God give us the strength and the wisdom to be able to achieve that. Have a wonderful day.